Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Wealth Management Strategies for U.S. Expats Living in the EU. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful. My name is Jacob Shelton. I'm the International Financial Advisor with Holborn Assets. I specialize helping American expats navigate the complexities of cross-border finance, tax compliance, and long-term wealth planning. I've been a financial advisor for over a decade, mostly back in the US, working for firms such as Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan. I also have my master's in finance from the University of Arizona. Currently live in Valencia, Spain. So I've been through the same moving process as many of you. Even moving my dog over, talked to someone today who's moving 7 cats over. So that's a little bit more difficult, but the golden retriever puppy was certainly not easy either. But whether you recently relocated or have been living in Europe for years, today's session is designed to give you actionable insights to protect and grow your wealth abroad. So you should see a Q&A button below. We'll have a little bit of a session at the end of presentation today. But there have been a few questions already submitted, so I'm going to try to answer as many as possible. Might not be able to get to yours. It might be a little bit quicker of a webinar today as well. I have a flight that was bumped up thanks to Iberian Air, headed back down to Malaga for a few days. And so my window just got a little bit shorter. But I will try to get to as many questions as possible. There is also going to be a QR code shown during the Q&A session with a link to book a free consultation directly into my calendar. And the presentation will also be recorded and posted on the the Holborn YouTube page. So I'll make sure that everyone who registered will be sent a link, as well as another link to book into my calendar in case that's going to be the best fit for you. And if you need to ask more direct personal questions. So living abroad does open up some incredible opportunities, but it does introduce some massive complexities. As a US citizen in the EU, you're subject to two regulatory systems, two tax regimes, and often limited access to familiar financial products. Now, one note on this presentation is it's not country specific, so I do quite a few country specific presentations as well. Please send me an email if you'd like a schedule of the next webinar for your particular country. However, most of the challenges are true no matter which country you reside in. You most likely don't have access to the previous financial advisor that you used back in the States. You're unable to take advantage of the various country-specific products that non-US expats take advantage of. And of course, a huge issue this year is the exchange rate risk from US dollars to the euro that we've seen. In the EU, financial regulation varies by country, but many US-based products like mutual funds are restricted throughout the EU due to FATCA and MiFID II, which is why working with a regulated advisor in your country of residence is critical. So we help clients navigate these limitations and identify compliant, high-quality alternatives. And as we identify these alternatives, we do need to be hyper aware to avoid PFICs or passive foreign investment companies. Think like a foreign mutual fund or foreign ETF. The IRS taxes these at a much higher rate, and it can be extremely high tax filing costs with the CPA in the US. So it's certainly something that we need to avoid when we can. But cross-border planning isn't always just about growing your wealth, it's also about protecting it. US expats must comply with IRS reporting requirements like the FATCA and FBAR, and also meet local EU reporting regulations, such as here in Spain, we have the Modelo 720, where you report all of your foreign assets. Much like the FBAR, a little bit higher of a threshold, but it is something that we do need to really comply on both sides of the pond to make sure that we can go forward smoothly without any sort of penalties. The penalties for noncompliance on either side can be pretty severe, so proactive planning and getting the right professionals in place is key. Fortunately, the US has tax treaties with many EU countries to help avoid double taxation. So you can be eligible for foreign tax credits, foreign housing credits, the foreign earned income exclusion. Just as a side note, right? If you're retired, this is probably not going to be the best fit for you. I've gotten a lot of questions about this recently, but that is only for earned income, either from employment or self-employment. So a K1, sure, that can work, or the similar form in the country of your new residence, but it does have to be earned income. It does not include any type of IRA, 401k, or the other alphabet soup of American retirement accounts. Any withdrawals from those, that is not covered under the foreign earned income exclusion. But and then there's also treaty-based exemptions, but those benefits typically aren't automatic. You need to claim them properly. So we work closely with tax professionals on both sides to ensure our clients maximize these sort of opportunities. So let's shift to what we're all actually here for, right? Is the investment. So expats often face limited access to U.S. brokerage accounts, so it's important to build a globally diversified portfolio using compliant firms, either in the U.S. or globally. Um, when I say that we're limited access, it's because most institutions don't actually allow U.S. citizens that have moved abroad. I mean, the companies that I've worked for previously, J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Fidelity and Vanguard to some extent, none of them really work with Americans once you've made the move. And so even on the EU side, most institutions won't work with us either on investments. So it can be a little bit more difficult to navigate, to be sure, but we work with a multitude of custodians on both sides, and offshore. So we can certainly find one that will be a good fit for you. And we also focus on, and this might be a little bit different than what you're used to, is multi-currency diversification. Again, the US dollar doesn't look super promising, up and coming. So definitely something to keep an eye on, particularly in this interest rate cut environment, but a little bit more on that later. We also focus on risk adjusted asset allocation, depending on if you are 30 and currently working. Just signed a new client this week who's 31 and working on some pretty high technology products, who we're going to allocate his assets much differently than someone who is 70 years old and focus on using his assets purely for income. And we're really trying to preserve his wealth for the long term. He's healthy. He might live to 100. We want to make sure at 100 he has access to all the funds he needs, as well as any type of estate planning for his heirs. We also focus on tax efficient structures. So, our goal is to help you grow your wealth while minimizing the exposure to volatility and tax drag. Particularly, you probably moved to a higher tax jurisdiction, something that we need to be aware of and manage that. So currency fluctuation can have a major impact both on your returns and potentially on your lifestyle if you're depending on a singular currency to fund your lifestyle, right? The US dollar is down 15%. I think it's actually a little bit more now, but year to date. And again, we do foresee the US dollar falling a little bit further against major currencies. But by diversifying across geographies and currencies, we can help clients reduce this risk and stabilize the long-term performance, which is certainly important for those earning in euros, but planning retirement in dollars or vice versa. One of the biggest ways we do this for clients planning large purchases in another currency is through a forward contract. So we partner with a few different institutions. I would say one of the best is Smart Currency Exchange for this type of contract, which allows you to lock in an exchange rate for up to a year. So if you have a house that you're currently selling, you're going to buy a new house in the EU, this type of contract can be extremely beneficial, just as you might not have that full amount of cash to transfer into euros today, but we want to make sure that the exchange rate doesn't degrade further. So what I've been really suggesting to clients is maybe 50% of the value of that house. That way we're able to hedge the downside. But if the rates, it's for some reason or another, let's say there's another trade agreement agreed to, and the exchange rates get better, then we're not missing out on that upside either. Retirement planning as an expat requires integrating US accounts like IRAs, 401ks with local pension schemes. So we help clients maintain US retirement accounts compliantly, evaluate potential EU pension options, build hybrid strategies that align with their retirement goals, but it's not about just saving. It's about optimizing the withdrawals, minimizing taxes, and ensuring continued access. But one question that I have gotten more than ever, I would say, starting this time last November, I'm sure you can probably guess what political event triggered that, but it is, should I keep my US retirement accounts and should I keep them in the States? So for the vast majority of people, I would say that yes, it makes the most sense to keep those retirement accounts in the US. However, there are some options to move those offshore and still be able to keep that incredibly beneficial retirement account structure and tax structure. But we do guide clients through different rollover options, distribution strategies, what that means for your cross-border tax implications, so that you can make informed decisions that support your lifestyle and legacy. And we really guide you through a lot of those decisions. But estate planning is also often looked, but can be critical for expats. Different jurisdictions have different inheritance laws, and without proper planning, your assets could be subject to unnecessary taxes or extremely long delays. So we work with different professionals, both in the US and in the EU, to draft cross-border wills, which typically involves having a supreme will, if you will. Sorry, a lot of wills there. But in the US, that really says that it supersedes all other wills. And then you have a will in your local country that really refers back to the US will. And that's really one of the best ways that we've found to ensure that both jurisdictions comply to that US will with its stated goals. That being said, there still can be forced inheritance situations, particularly in France, which is unfortunate because they do have much higher inheritance taxes. But there are different routes that we can use, particularly around life insurance or products from life insurance companies, such as annuities, to be able to navigate those and be as tax efficient as possible. While estate planning, while I'm on that subject, annuities can also be great for what we call a QLAC, qualified longevity annuity contract. And so what those do is move your RMD from the current age is 73 to 85. Even those who are, I believe the cutoff is if you've turned 63 this year, your RMD will be 75 when you reach that age, but we're still able to push that out to 85. So it can be a huge benefit for those living in a much higher tax country than what you were living at in the US. And so we can really make sure that if you're not using that RMD for your income and lifestyle, and it's just causing you tax stress, well, let's go ahead and push that down the road. We can do that fairly quickly and easily, and with still having flexibility, right? If you do need those funds before you turn 85, you have instant access to them. And so certainly something to take a look at and ask about if that situation is going to be right for you. My apologies. I do know that I've been a little bit behind on the slides. I do end up going off the top of my head on a lot of these webinars. I've given quite a few. I do continue them on a monthly basis. So if I didn't necessarily mention something today that you are interested in learning more about, either schedule on in, or I do have quite a few of these already online on Holborn's YouTube. I know that I'm running through this fairly quickly. But that is intentional so that I don't miss my flight. So sorry about that. I am going to blame Iberia Airlines mismanagement. But Holborn Assets is regulated throughout the EU as well as in the United States. So we are able to assist US clients, whether they are still living in the US and simply want to move assets outside of the States, or if you have already made the move to the EU and want to keep your assets either in the US, or if we want to make them, if we want to move those assets abroad. We do full financial planning for our clients to make sure that, well, what we're helping you manage is really the best fit for you, and so that you get a true roadmap to what your retirement will look like and what your financial success will look like. We manage those portfolios according to those financial plans and the suitability standards here in the EU to make sure that, again, it's all customized portfolios, customized plans, different products that maybe you might not have necessarily seen from a US financial advisor. We do partner with your tax attorneys and tax advisors, again, both here in the EU and in the US. There are a few CPAs that really can do both sides, but I found that it's typically much cheaper for the average person to have a professional on both sides. For more complex situations, it can be good to partner with someone. Really comes to mind Michael Mertz, who can, yes, be a little bit more expensive than your average, but if you have a complex situation, typically he ends up earning his fee and much more on those tax savings. Feel free to reach out to any introduction for someone that might be a good fit for you. To get started with us, please reach out, go ahead and schedule a initial consultation. We do ask quite a bit of personal information, so please be prepared to give that so that we can really turn that information into a proposal and make sure that that proposal is going to be a good fit for you. Again, we do not simply churn and burn clients and give everyone the same thing. It's not a one size fits all. This is a tailored process and really needs to be treated as such. And so certainly want to make sure that everyone's prepared for. I try to keep it not too invasive, but want to be accurate with everything that we do. Okay, well, everyone, we have made it to the end. I know it was a little bit quicker. I do apologize for that. I also have, so this is my own QR code here on the left side to book directly into my calendar for more detailed or personal information that we want to get into there, as well as personal questions. And then I also wanted to include Jason Swan's QR code. If you are thinking about the Portuguese Golden Visa, he is on my team as the senior partner. He's really the top expert. He does more golden visas than anyone else in the world. I know the program has changed slightly, but there are some particular advantages for Americans right now with some of the new funds out there that actually get you access to NHR 2.0 with some of those amazing tax benefits. And so once again, guys, please feel free to use that Q&A button at the bottom and load some questions up. I do have time for a few. So let's see, let's jump into this first one. Are U.S. federal pensions and U.S. Social Security passive incomes generally taxed? Yes. So if you're a federal employee, depending on which country you end up choosing, Spain and Portugal are great examples of not taxing those US federal employee pensions. However, both of those countries will still tax US Social Security and at their rates. And even when they're not taxing a sort of income, they still include those as part of the bottom part of their progressive income tax rates. And so the Social Security does end up getting taxed at that slightly higher rate. So great question. It's different for each country. It's also, I just mentioned federal government employees because that was the question, but it can also work for local and state government employees as well with their pensions, as well as teachers, both high school, elementary, and also university. Got quite a few professors that are making the move right now. Well, this is actually it looks like it's an update to the previous question, but I think it's a good update, so I appreciate that. Update to the previous question about U.S. pensions and U.S. Social Security passive income. Are these taxed in EU countries above the tax treaties due to the higher EU tax rates? Again, it's going to be dependent on which double taxation or dual taxation agreement that you're really following there. But and it's still going to be typically separated between the government employee pension and the Social Security, but typically they are taxed in the EU countries. because of the higher taxes there, as well as typically the resident country has first rights to that taxation. So again, going back to Spain and Portugal on this, but the dual tax agreement actually defers that tax to the US federal government for their employees and other government employees, but will retain that taxation ability for Social Security. But that will be different country by country. Next question is, would you clarify tax situation on US based IRAs, 401ks? So this is going to vary on the different country that you're in. Again, so France in particular, the dual tax agreement is extremely beneficial for US expats. And so for any type of IRA, 401k withdrawal, you would just be taxed in the US at the US federal income tax rates. However, most other countries don't have that provision in that dual tax agreement. And so you would be taxed as ordinary income when you do pull any funds out of those types of accounts. So I hope I answered your question there. What is the NHR program you just mentioned? Well, that's a great question. NHR has quite a bit to it, but it really makes the ability to be taxed much less as you're living in Portugal, really being able to still take advantage of the lower cost of living in Portugal, but assuming that we can structure your income in some correct ways, as well as just investment income, it can be much, much lower than what it would be without that NHR. And it's NHR 2.0 now, as opposed to the original NHR program that was so well known and really attracted so many expats to Portugal. Here's the next question. You mentioned France's dual tax agreement was more beneficial for US expats. Can you explain? Sure. So I just mentioned, right, IRAs and 401ks, instead of getting taxed on France's progressive income tax rates, you get taxed just on the federal income tax rate. And that also applies for any type of capital gains, dividends, interest in a taxable brokerage account. So what that really means, right, is particularly if you have lower income, well, you might even pay 0% still on those long-term capital gains. You have a pretty high threshold to still be in that 15% range even. And so that's incredibly more beneficial than being in France's 30% flat capital gains tax rate. Oh, here's another one. Does that capital gains tax rate also apply to homes? I would assume it's when you're selling your home in the US. This is something, actually, it's great timing for this question. I should have mentioned it in the presentation because I had this conversation 3 times today with different clients they have a home in the US to sell. They need to sell it before they move. What is the correct timing around this type of sale? And really, it's that you don't want to be a tax resident of your new country in the EU the same year that you sell your house. And so, because you want to take that capital gains exclusion that we have in the US, $250,000 for a single person, $500,000 for a married couple. If you are a tax resident in the EU as you sell your house, then there is no exemption. You pay the local country's capital gains tax rate, and it's going to be extremely costly. So certainly something that you want to avoid. I often recommend that people move July 1st, and so that they are under 183 days for that tax year. That's a very simplified calculation. If you're going to be playing it that closely, please book in to make sure that there aren't some of the common pitfalls around that 183 days that can still trip you up and make you a tax resident. One example is in Spain, you are a tax resident if your kids are going to public school. You can be there 3 months out of the year, and if they're going to public school, you are a tax resident. And so definitely something that there are some of those nuances. It's not just as simple as 183 days, even though it's often portrayed by that. I fall into that pitfall of portraying it like that all the time, but that's only because I'm checking off some of these other boxes for people. So that's really the only remaining rule left, but certainly something to keep in mind. Please feel free to book in. Happy to help and take a little bit of a deeper dive into your scenario. But I appreciate all of you joining, and I will see you next time. Thanks.